Hey witches, welcome to Busy, Gritty, Inked and Witchy, a magical living podcast for the busy witch. I'm Morgan, eclectic witch of almost 25 years, Avalon priestess, and busy witch. Here we'll talk all things witchy, from current metaphysical happenings to my busy witch tips and tricks, and everything in the in-between. This podcast is my personal journey, filled with my knowledge, opinions, and unique way of looking at the world. Join me as I weave the magical and the mundane in every episode. Hey witches, welcome back to Busy, Gritty, Inked and Witchy. I am Morgan, and today I am talking about Mercury, you fickle little bitch. Now, it might be a short episode today because I have already done an episode on Mercury retrograde. Now, that was back on episode 4. Yeah, episode 4 in 2021, okay? But when I did that episode, I did it as an overview. So I gave you what Mercury retrograde is, the energies, how to work with it. I gave you magical helpers, things like gemstones, herbs, things like that. And I did all of that in that first episode. And it was one of the first episodes I ever did. I also threw in other planetary retrogrades at the end. So I talked about Venus retrograde, Jupiter, all of them. Okay, so it is an amazing episode. If you have not listened to it, I highly recommend, because I'm not going to repeat a lot of stuff that's in there. And especially for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, I only started uploading podcasts to YouTube somewhere in the 80s or 90s. And I've only been recording them for YouTube, like video-wise, for the last, 5 or 6 episodes. So you would have to go to either our website and look at the Busy, Gritty, Inked and Witchy. There's like a little tab under About Us. An easy shortcut is just busy-witch.com, and that takes you right to the podcast page. Or if you're on Spotify or wherever, you can, listen there. So that was episode 4 back in 2021. Okay. So what I want to talk about today, I'll do a very quick refresh of Mercury retrograde, but I want to talk about how Mercury's being an asshole. That's what I want to do. Yeah, because that's how I'm feeling right now. So, all right, Mercury is the planet of communication, or it is the planet associated with communication, because it was named after the god Mercury, who is associated with communication, travel, and nowadays electronics. So that is why Mercury, the planet named after the god, when Mercury is in retrograde, it flips these things upside down. And what retrograde means is every planet has a path, an orbital path orbital path? Yeah, that's right. It goes around the sun, but to us, from our perspective, sometimes it looks like it's moving backwards. It is not actually moving backwards. It's just its trajectory in relation to the Earth. Okay. So Mercury retrograde happens about 3 times a year for about 3 weeks each time. And because Mercury is the planet of communication, travel, and now electronics, these are the things that are fucked up during Mercury retrograde. Okay. So communication, you may not be able to fully communicate your thoughts, your desires, or you feel like either when you're talking, the other people are like, what? Like, is she speaking a different language? Or you feel like you're hearing things in a completely different language. Like, communication is just not hitting equal. Emails, highly affected. Text, that would okay. I sent some emails last week and I haven't heard back from either one of the people, and that's very unlike them. So, duh. Okay, sorry. Text messages are messed up. Your phone may fry out. Travel. So if you're taking any kind of vacations right now, or even just, traveling from one side of town to the other, there may be delays. Car troubles are very prevalent during Mercury retrograde. And electronics take a shit. That's just what happens. If it's connected to the grid, it could fry, that is the most annoying thing ever. That is the most annoying part of Mercury retrograde. So those are the types of things that happen during Mercury retrograde, and those are the types of things that Mercury retrograde will affect. Okay. Now, I did a Reels last week, trying to set the record straight a little bit of what Mercury retrograde does not affect, because I've seen a rise, especially in the last couple of years, of people just on social media complaining about like massive long laundry lists of what's wrong with their life and then blaming it on Mercury retrograde. And I'm like, that's not Mercury retrograde. That's not what that is. So these are the types of things I have seen on social media that people have blamed on Mercury retrograde. And the first one is health. It was really big, maybe last year before. So it was after the pandemic, like after the really bad parts of it. And we were kind of starting to come down. And then somebody would be like, oh my God, I got COVID. I hate Mercury retrograde. And I'm like, that didn't have nothing to do with that. Mercury retrograde does not affect your health. Okay. I mean, there's gray areas. And it was funny because I posted the Reels on Instagram and Facebook, and then I, cross-posted it over to TikTok. And I think it was on TikTok that someone called me out because I said something about if you get drunk, wake up next to your ex in bed the next morning, that's not Mercury retrograde. And they said, their comment was, because Mercury is a time of reviewing, what if you reviewed your relationship with your ex and realized you wanted them back, and then that could have been Mercury retrograde? And I'm like, well, it also could have been Mercury retrograde that you got drunk and then you texted them by accident, or you thought you were texting someone else and then they came over and you were like, whatever, let's do this. So there are, exceptions. It depends on like specific details as to whether Mercury retrograde is involved. But that's one of them is health, life or death. Mercury's not going to be killing people. Okay. So please don't think that they're not going to be killing people and or pets. Mercury is not the planet of death. Okay. So that's, if something happens and if somebody dies, and it's during a Mercury retrograde, it is completely coincidental. Okay. It was just that time for that person to go. Relationships aren't really affected. That's going to be more Mars retrograde, especially Venus retrograde. But because communication is affected, that's where, again, you get that gray area. If there are communication issues within your relationship, or if a fight ensues and somebody says the wrong thing and it leads to a breakup, or they say something that was misconstrued by the other person and that leads to a breakup, then, that could be it. I do have a lot of people ask if getting fired from their job has anything to do with Mercury retrograde. Again, like, blatantly flat out, no, Mercury, you're not going to get fired during Mercury retrograde, but it depends on what your job is, number one, and because communication is a huge factor of Mercury retrograde. There could have been some kind of miscommunication that led to your firing, or proper communication that led to your firing. Let's be honest, like maybe you were shit at your job and no one said anything until Mercury retrograde. So, I want to say I'm sorry for being so blunt this episode, but I'm not. I'm not sorry. This is my podcast, and this is how I feel about Mercury retrograde. And am I risking it by actually doing an episode on Mercury retrograde during Mercury retrograde? Do I risk being misunderstood? 100%. And I was willing to take that risk, so I continued forward. So those are the types of things that Mercury does not generally affect. Okay. So, retrogrades, any type of retrograde is good for a lot of things that start with so try to think about that. If you're like, oh my God, I'm going to fear a Mercury retrograde or Jupiter retrograde, or, let's be honest, if you're going to fear a retrograde, which I don't think you should, you can work with any energy out there. But if you're going to fear a retrograde, If you've not been a great person, it would be Saturn retrograde, because Saturn retrograde, which I actually believe is happening right now too, maybe. There's like 4 or 5 planets in retrograde at the time of this episode airing. So I think Saturn might be one of them. Saturn retrograde is the karma retrograde. So if you've been putting out good stuff, good energy, that's what you're going to get back during Saturn retrograde. If you've been putting out shit energy, then that's what you're going to get back during Saturn retrograde. And let me tell you, Mars retrograde, which thank God only happens, it's a little over once a year. So we don't have a Mars retrograde every year. We did not have a Mars retrograde last year. And I think this year, if I remember correctly, these are the types of things I probably should have written down before doing an episode, but this is what happens. I just like to go off on tangents, and you all know that. So Mars retrograde, I believe, starts at the end of 2024 and goes into 2025, I believe. But do not quote me on that, and you might want to look it up. During Mars retrograde, everybody's an asshole. I'm just going to say that. Everyone is on edge. Our tempers are flared. There's so much anger. And it becomes bottled up and then it explodes. So if you're going to not like retrogrades, okay, Saturn is a good one if you're not a good person. And Mars, just everyone's an asshole during Mars retrograde. But Mercury retrograde just makes things inconvenient, okay? But anyway, as I was saying, during any planetary retrograde, think retrograde and things that start with RE, okay? Like rest, rejuvenate yourself, review your goals. Mercury retrograde is not a great time to move forward with plans just because of the possibility for miscommunication. So if you can kind of take a step back and look over everything, dot your I's, cross your T's, that's the kind of things you do. And then as soon as Mercury retrograde ends, then you move forward. You take those steps, okay? So you can review your action plan. You should rest, especially rest and patience within that planet's realm, okay? So because Mercury affects communication, travel, and electronics, you're going to need to rest a little bit when it comes to these things, or have a little bit more patience when it comes to these areas, okay? The Venus retrograde affects love and relationships. So you may want to have a little bit more patience about relationships during that time. Okay, so that's what I mean by have rest and patience when it comes to that planet's realm of expertise, so to say. Okay. Rejuvenate, renew your goals, renew yourself. So these are the types of things you want to do during Mercury retrograde. Okay, well, any retrograde, but during Mercury retrograde especially, you're going to need to definitely reread emails several times before you send them. Make sure you're clear in what you're saying. Travel plans, I know we're in Mercury retrograde, but if you wanted to go do like oil change, tire check, stuff like that, that's the kind of stuff like preparing for Mercury retrograde you want to try and do before it happens, okay? Electronics, if you have backups, that's great. If not, just understand that shit could possibly go haywire during Mercury retrograde. And again, I'm just going to go back to patience. You have to just take a deep breath and be like, fuck Mercury retrograde, you fickle bitch. Because that's where I'm at right now, okay? And trust me, like in the very first episode, in episode 4, when I first talked about this, I told you about, the colors blue, yellow, lemongrass, rosemary, frankincense, gemstones like hematite, fluorite. All of these kind of things are magical helpers, okay? I run a witchcraft store, you guys. We have Mercury retrograde candles. I have gemstones in every corner of this fucking office. I have gemstones next to printers. We are so prepared for Mercury retrograde that it just, there's no 100% controlling it, and it's just annoying as fuck, okay? So this episode, I wanted to just get that out, vent a little, and then let you know how Mercury is being a fickle bitch in my life right now. Because it is. Oh my God. So the first thing for us is always the printers. Okay. So Mercury retrograde lasts for about 3 weeks, but there is a pre-shadow and a post-shadow, which is about 10 days to 2 weeks before Mercury retrograde? I don't think it's that long. It's maybe like 10 days to a week. And then 10 days to a week after Mercury retrograde. Okay. There's a pre-shadow and a post-shadow. And we can tell immediately when the fucking pre-shadow starts in this office. We have 4 printers, you guys. 4 printers. And it never fails. Like, we have 4 printers for a reason, because at least 1 to 2 of them always just stop working. Or you have to unplug it and replug it. And I've had to uninstall and reinstall. They're ridiculous. And the printers in our office are the first thing to go. The first thing. Now, we've had them die in the past, like completely die, and we've had to replace them. But right now we have 4 printers for just this reason. Okay. For me this year, we have had a dying washing machine for 4 years, I think. But Mercury retrograde, finally, my washing machine is RIP. The electrical. So again, and this is how you know it's Mercury retrograde. Our washing machine had an electrical panel. It was one of the button ones, not one of the dial ones. So the whole thing is run by an electrical panel, computer panel. That one started to take a shit. So, and it's been doing it. But what's really funny is we've just dealt with it for 4 years. But every Mercury retrograde, that is when the washing machine decides to not work at all. Then Mercury retrograde passes and the washing machine goes right back to working again. So this is why we have never replaced it in the last 4 years, because we had tricks. We have to unplug it, leave it unplugged overnight, plug it back in. Don't touch the fabric softener button. Don't do it. Don't touch it. And it only goes on dark. You put it over to dark. That's your cold water. And then it would start. And so this is what we did every 3 weeks. 3 times a year, because as soon as Mercury retrograde left, our washing machine went back to normal. It did not this time. This time there was a lid lock error. So it was like, hey, we can't lock the lid. And I'm like, that's fine. My washing machine all through the 80s and 90s and 2000s, probably longer than that, you couldn't, because it was a top loader. You couldn't lock those lids. We used to be able to just open it up, throw that sock in that you found down the hallway as you were like taking your clothes to the washing machine. You fill everything up, you turn around, there's a fucking random sock behind you. That's fine. In the 90s, we opened up the lid, threw it in, kept going. Washing machines nowadays don't let you do that. And so now, this time it was a lid lock error. Would not clear it. We left it unplugged for almost 24 hours. Wouldn't work. So rest in peace, my lovely washing machine. Finally, Mercury finally got you. What else? Website glitches are huge. We had one this morning. I had a customer message me this morning, and she was like, hey, when's the website or the page for the subscription box going to be updated? I'm like, it was updated October or August 5th. Like a week ago? What are you talking about? Nope. We ran some updates last night, and apparently that page just decided to revert back to an old page. There's no explanation needed. Just Mercury retrograde. That is the explanation. Last Mercury retrograde, our car battery died. That's very, very common. And car batteries are not cheap anymore. No, they're over $100. And then if you give them your old nasty one, they're like, here's $5 credit. And I'm like, thanks. Okay. And then the internet. The internet has been shitting out so much. Like, we already have crappy internet at our house. Well, it's not crappy. It's crappy when everybody else gets home from work and then everybody gets on the internet in the entire neighborhood. And so you have like competing waves. I don't know. The Cox guy explained it to me. But now the internet here at the office, which we kind of need to run things, that's been shitting out lately. So, yeah. That's Mercury retrograde, you guys. And that's honestly all I wanted to do today. I have, to be just completely honest with you all, I have a splitting headache. I have had a headache for 2 days now. It has nothing to do with Mercury retrograde. It has to do with the monsoon season here in Tucson. Pressure builds up in my head, and it's going to take an axe to relieve it. So I was like, what am I going to do today? What am I going to do for the podcast? And I was like, Mercury. And it was so funny because I was like, what am I going to do for the podcast? And that's when the internet shit out on us. And I was like, Mercury, you fickle bitch. And I'm like, oh, that's going to be my podcast episode because that's how I'm feeling. And the podcast is supposed to be current witchcraft happenings. So yeah. So this Mercury retrograde lasts until... I should have had that information too for you all that listen now. I don't know if it's the 18th or the 28th. I do know it just started on the 5th. So then that would probably be the 28th is when it's going to end, not the 18th, unfortunately, because that would only be 2 weeks. So yeah, it's probably the 28th of August. And then I think we do have a third one at the end of the year. So... yeah, shipping things are always messed up too. So we have a lot of people, there's an increased number of people who message us and say things like, my subscription box was marked delivered. It was not delivered. Like that's also Mercury retrograde. It's also the shitty post office too. So you got to keep that you have to take that into consideration as well. And just as like a little final fun note for today's episode, witchcraft should always be taken with a certain healthy dose of logic. You know what I mean? So I do see how on social media, when anybody says anything about Mercury retrograde, a lot of people that don't understand, they make fun of us. And I 100% understand that. But I think as long as you aren't going all the way over into Mercury retrograde is absolutely ruining my life and all of my problems are because of it, and you have a healthy dose of realism, then it's better, It doesn't look as bad, but you should always have a healthy dose of realism, even when it comes to any kind of witchcraft practice. Like maybe your spell didn't work, because you just weren't feeling it deep down. You know what I mean? Maybe this retrograde is going to be easy for you, because you're taking proper precautions or because you understand that Mercury retrograde is happening, but okay, I have a headache today. That's not Mercury retrograde. You know what I mean? So healthy dose of reality along with your witchcraft, along with your astrological alignments, along with your anything is extremely helpful. It helps keep you grounded. And it can also help you figure out, I can rule out Mercury retrograde from my headache. You know what I mean? So I'm sitting here like, okay, could it be this, new supplement I'm taking? Am I dehydrated? Am I just pissed off and stressed? Am I tense? So I can rule out Mercury retrograde. Do you know what I mean? Because I have that healthy dose of reality in there. So just keep that in mind with anything that you go to do in spiritual work. Just have a healthy dose of reality sitting there to help ground you back down, just in case, So that's what I have for you all today. I hope that this was at least fun, slightly informative. Maybe it clears up a little bit of Mercury retrograde for you and helps you understand what it is and what it isn't. This month in the Ink Spirit Coven, we are finishing up with the element of fire. We have a fire releasing ritual coming up on the 18th, and it's going to be on Zoom. I cannot wait. It's going to be so much fun. And then in September, we are moving into the water element, and we're starting off with finding your flow, and we're going to be talking a lot about intuition as well. So that's going to be September in the Ink Spirit Coven. So if you would like to join, head to inkedspirit.com where you can learn more and sign up. And if you use coupon code podcast5, all together, one word, then that will give you $5 off your first month. So thank you all so much for being here with me. I just drew a blank. It's just, I swear. All right. Yeah, thank you all for being here, for giving me a platform to share my knowledge, vent a little bit about Mercury being a fickle bitch, and for entertaining you, because I do love doing that too. So thank you all so much, and I will see you all again soon. Bye.